In the age of technology, where the internet is available to many people around the world, it is almost impossible to avoid media piracy, even if you are not directly involved in the practice. Digital piracy is the illegal reproduction, usage, or distribution of copyrighted software and media, such as audio products, videos, written works, and pictures. Piracy sites are everywhere, and this consumer misbehavior is even practiced on popular social media sites. All you would have to do is know what to search for and where to look. Studies also show that digital piracy consumption is more prevalent in countries with lower gross national income per capita, low minimum wage, high unemployment rates, and where laws are not strictly enforced. Fitting these criteria, the Philippines is one of the Asia-Pacific's region's top consumers of digital piracy. Let's look at the history of consumer digital piracy in the Philippines. Prior to the introduction of digital technology, digital piracy was limited in scope and primarily used for personal or non-commercial purposes.
You know it's illegal, download copyrighted music?
According to the International Intellectual Property Alliance, piracy has always remained dominant in the Philippine market, even before the early 2000s. Optical media piracy, or unauthorized music CDs, took root in the Philippines in 1999 and grew in the 2000s. But then, digital piracy exploded in 2008 and 2009, with stalls in shopping malls openly dedicated to illegally downloading songs to mobile devices. Discs then became less popular as online media piracy became more convenient with direct illegal downloading, peer-to-peer sharing, and other evasive techniques with the latest technologies. Since then, piracy has increased over the years, with more illegal streaming devices and sites being set up, extending not just to pirate movies and music, but also to software, games, and academic books. Almost any form of media could be pirated. In 2020, the COVID-19 lockdown has also resulted in major changes in online behavior and media consumption. Reports and complaints against piracy have surged during the pandemic as many sectors of society shifted to an online setup. Statistically speaking, 61% of Filipinos consume pirated content, with 44% consuming it through social media applications such as Facebook, TikTok, or Twitter. They are often in the form of movie snippets with distorted or edited audio, speed, or aspect ratios to get past the copyright system. Products are also downloaded through malicious links, torrent sites, streaming sites, or even through messaging platforms like Telegram and Viber. And out of 121 intellectual property violation reports in 2020, 54 of them were digital piracy cases. 40% were related to audiovisual media piracy such as movies and shows, 25% to ebooks, and 16% to software. TV and film piracy alone has cost the local Philippine Industry Association of Video Producers, Distributors, and such to lose at least 1 billion pesos in potential revenues in 2020. Even so, Filipinos do not see piracy as a grave offense. And among studies done on college students in Southeast Asia, many justify digital piracy. Their intent to pirate was strongly influenced by their consumer attitude with little fear of the legal consequences. The relationship between technology and piracy is a strong one. As Kenneth Fleischman said in the Digital Sublime, Myth, Power, and Cyberspace, the design and use of technologies reshape processes of cooperation and conflict among groups within our global society. Thus, it is important to view digital piracy as a result of decisions made by many different actors and is affected by pre-existing social, economic, and technological contexts. The purpose of this video, then, is to educate college students about the nature, laws, and practice of digital piracy, which may aid in our own reflections on this consumer misbehavior.
There are several reasons given by college students as to why this consumer misbehavior happens. These justifications can be encompassed in 5 main themes. First is the denial of injury. In a study done by U in 2012, it was found that most college students believe that there is not much perceivable harm caused by digital piracy. In terms of crime seriousness, many considered it to be the least serious type of crime as compared to loitering, speeding, or email spamming. And while they do acknowledge that it is a crime, most of them consider digital piracy to be even more favorable than others because, quote-unquote, it does not usually cause physical harm. Which also brings us to the second justification, or the denial of victim. If digital piracy does not cause harm, then that means no one gets hurt, right? Well, unfortunately, that is not really the case. Piracy is not a victimless crime. Others continue to reason this out by saying that the only victims are film stars, famous artists, or big companies who probably don't need the money that they would get from their content. However, alongside these big-time people are hundreds or thousands of smaller people such as camera crew, assistants, set designers, among many others, who work behind the scenes and who are not as well off as the people we see on screens. Aside from this, the small-time artists, writers, or producers will get the biggest hit if ever the industries they belong to start producing less due to the prevalence of piracy. But what about the academic papers where the profit only goes to the publishers and none for the actual researchers? This is where the third justification comes in, the condemnation of the condemners. Here, the accountability is being placed on the alleged victims. Some college students justify piracy by putting the blame on artists or publishers who ask for an unfairly expensive amount of money in exchange for their content. While it is sometimes true, it still does not change the fact that the act of piracy itself is illegal. Another factor contributing to the attitude of college students toward piracy is the denial of responsibility. From the study of Cohen and Cornwell in 1989, they found that most college students believe that campuses are to blame for failing to provide adequate support for software purchase. In short, this idea implies that the fault is really on the institution and not so much on the individuals. Lastly, some resort to the fifth justification or appeal to higher loyalties, that digital piracy is acceptable if it is for the greater good, for instance, pirating research papers for expansion of knowledge or innovation. In the same study by Cohen and Cornwell with 300 college students, it was found that around 84% of the sample believed it is acceptable to engage in digital piracy as long as it is for educational use. Aside from these 5 primary motivations, another factor that influences people's perception of piracy includes perceived anonymity on the internet. Since there is less certainty of being identified as a pirate, there is less perceived certainty of punishment and thus lower risks. And because there are lower risks, more people would try to engage in it, which all the more encourages many others to pirate, seeing how normal it already has become in our society. Recently, reports of site traffic spikes in torrenting and streaming sites all over the world emerged due to the pandemic lockdowns, where people had to be stuck at home and look for TV shows and movies to binge on. Before we move on to the next part, we just have some quick questions for our fellow college students. First, have you ever tried engaging in digital piracy? If yes, what kinds of content have you pirated and why? You may take this anonymous survey to share your answers.
The Intellectual Property Office of the Philippines, or IPO-PHL, is a government agency responsible for the registration of intellectual property and conflict resolution of intellectual property rights in the Philippines. The agency works under the Department of Trade and Industry, mandated to administer and implement state policies on intellectual property to strengthen IP rights in the country. Besides assuring that IP rights are protected, IPO-PHL also encourages government agencies to partake in the initiative by holding campaigns against piracy. According to the agency, the fight against piracy should be a multi-agency approach, such that the National Committee on IP Rights is composed of the Departments of Trade, Interior, Information and Communications Technology, Justice, as well as the Bureau of Customs, Food and Drug Administration, National Book Development Board, National Bureau of Investigation, National Telecommunications Commission, Optical Media Board, Office of the Special Envoy for Transactional Crimes, and the Philippine National Police. The IPO-PHL highlights that there should be shared consciousness among these government agencies of the knowledge of IP, such as in copyrights, trademark, or simply the moral ascendancy to know what is legal and what is considered stealing. In view of the data that more students are engaging in such heinous offenses, the IPO-PHL is also coordinating with the Department of Education and Commission on Higher Education
to hold seminars and educational institutions. The agency believes that in order to eliminate all forms of piracy, the general public must be educated that violation of IP rights is a violation to the state. Along with the legal consequences that come with such violations, they are also accountable to their own morality. Additionally, such actions harm the economy and innovation in the Philippines in the long term. One of the anti-piracy initiatives by the Optical Media Board or OBM is to integrate the promotion of IP rights in their infomercials, which are shown in all cinemas across the country. I think you have seen some of these infomercials in the cinema, played before the actual movie begins. An example of which is this.
Ngayon mismo, nasa 300,000 downloads na ang mga mobile games ko. Mahigit doble nito ang illegally shared.
Not only did this plan improve the cinema industry, but has helped in preventing the use of unlicensed software. The IPO-PHL also responded to the growing digital piracy by partnering with the Asia Video Industry Association or AVIA to initiate site blocking activities in the country. Just recently, IPO-PHL has also partnered with the Motion Picture Association or MPA in assisting pirate monitoring and site blocking system. According to Director General Rowell Barba, this partnership elevates IPO-PHL such that new efforts are being undertaken to foster a safe digital community that respects IP rights. Relating this to concepts in HEED 131 or in consumer education, the 5 consumer responsibilities should be reflected with how college students and other consumers deal with pirated content. First, action. Consumers should assert themselves and ensure that there is a fair deal between them and their purchases. Besides this, I believe consumers should act on the basis of their morality. When they see or commit offenses against IP, the right thing to do is to act. Report the people behind this fraudulent act, most especially the businesses who promote the purchase of these illegal products and services. Of course, it seems impossible to implicate oneself when you realize you're committing violations against IP rights. But consumers must be knowledgeable when to not commit such practices and how to act responsibly. If you are not yet practicing responsible consumerism in terms of digital content, then I think you should start now. Second, there needs to be social concern. As college students and as consumers, we must understand that our actions are reflective of what happens in society. Our own consumption can affect other people. Illegal activity has indirect implications to the lives of other people, most especially the disadvantaged sectors of the community, because piracy is considered an economic burden for the country. So instead of adding to the national income, the only people benefiting are those who pirate and the businesses who market pirated content. Third, consumers must understand that solidarity is needed in order to win against the struggle. College students should encourage their peers to avoid engaging in such illegal activities. It is only through the collective effort of all consumers that businesses will understand that the market for illegal products and services is no longer viable, which will subsequently put a stop to their practices. Fourth, consumers must be critically aware. Question the products you see online. Learn to ask for authentication. Engage in respectful discussions to avoid being deluded into committing something unlawful. Being critical means regarding one's purchases as important, even if such purchases are considered small. Finally, all consumers should practice environmental responsibility. Piracy often entails more digital footprint that covers much more carbon dioxide emissions, which has a big impact on global warming. Think about it. Digital piracy ultimately makes it harder for each one of us to breathe. So while it presents favorable for you to just illegally stream online or to avail applications from middlemen who are selling them for relatively cheaper prices, think about the implications of such actions. While we do believe that education should be free and the state should support its students by providing them with the resources to support their learning, digital piracy was and remains a crime. It costs jobs, hurts businesses, and encourages criminals to continue stealing content. Downloading content from the internet is easy, true, but that doesn't stop it from being wrong and being illegal.